I turned 28 earlier this month. Well, last month when I'm putting this out. I'm recording this in January. And that reminded me that the youngest ever F1 race winner is now 10 years younger than me. I don't know how to deal with this. So rather than just feel sorry for myself about this fact, I thought I'd make a video today. The 9 youngest drivers to ever win an F1 race. And as always, likes, subs, notification bells, all that good stuff if you enjoy what I do. Let's get cracking. Number 9, we have Robert Kubica. At 23 years and 184 days old, he won the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix. This is one of the more famous Canadian Grand Prix races. He qualified P2 behind Lewis Hamilton. Was behind him at the start of the race. They all came into the pits, came out, and this is where the infamous Lewis didn't see the red light at the end of the pit lane incident happened. Kubica and Raikkonen were right in front of him, and he veered left into Kimi. Kubica could have quite easily got tangled in that, but he didn't. He got away with it. The race ended up as a BMW Sauber 1-2, in fact, in the end, with Nick Heidfeld finishing second. It's mad to think this was just a year after his horrific Canadian Grand Prix crash in 2007. That is legitimately one of the scariest accidents I think I've ever seen an F1 car have. And it was Robert's first and only ever win in Formula 1. Guaranteed more would have come if BMW hadn't tanked the car development towards the end of, I think it was that season. And of course his horrific accident in rallying. Robert Kubica was an unreal talent back in the day. It's such a shame we didn't really get to see the potential that he had. Number 8, at 23 years and 157 days old, just 27 days younger than Bobby K, we've got 2003 Malaysian Grand Prix winner Kimi Raikkonen in that iconic West-branded McLaren. Beautiful car, absolutely adore it. Kimi ended up winning by about 40 seconds from Rubens Barrichello in the end. This was back in the refueling days, so that had a big impact on strategy. And Kimi went on to finish that 2003 season just 2 points behind the great Michael Schumacher. Another quick mention for Fernando Alonso. This 2003 Malaysian Grand Prix was his first ever pole and his first ever podium because he finished in P3. And we might see Fernando again pop up down this list. Number 7, a man 22 years and 154 days old, 1 year, 3 days younger than the Iceman, the 2007 Canadian Grand Prix winner. It's, of course, Lewis Hamilton. His first season in F1, almost his first title, and that same race where, again, Robert had that horrific accident. Fernando Alonso was his teammate at the time, lined up alongside Lewis Hamilton in P2, but overshot the first corner. And from then on, it was just a cakewalk for Lewis. He just ran away with it. And what we did get at the end of this race was one of the most iconic pieces of James Allen commentary lines. After Lewis crossed the finish line, if he can do this after 6 races, what can he achieve in the future? Little did he know just how much Lewis would go on to achieve. In 6th, we have a man 22 years and 104 days old, 50 days younger than Lewis Hamilton when he won his first race. At the 1959 US Grand Prix, it is Bruce McLaren. Yes, the same famous Kiwi who went on to create the McLaren we all know and love today. But at the time, he wasn't racing a McLaren. It wasn't his own team yet. He was racing a Cooper Climax in 59. This US Grand Prix was at Sebring, which, imagine a race at Sebring nowadays. How bumpy that is. To be fair, I love Sebring as a track. I would love to see them make it F1 appropriate one day, because that would just be sick. Bruce qualified P10, but benefited from retirements going on left, right and centre. Look, it was the 50s. Okay, cars were retiring all the time. But actually, Jack Brabham was leading this race quite convincingly and then ran out of fuel on the final lap. Big ups. Also, fun fact, this race was the final race up until Australia 2019 to award an extra point for fastest lap. In 5th, we have a man that was 22 years and 80 days old, just 24 days younger than old Brucey McLaren. His name's Troy Rutman. The race was technically the Indy 500, but it will count because the points from that race did count towards the F1 Championship in 1952. This one is often discounted though, but I'm just putting it in anyway. The 1952 championship was being absolutely dominated by Alberto Ascari. He'd go on to win it convincingly, but this race he retired after just 40 laps. And a man by the name of Bill Vukovic led for 150 laps, but ended up retiring. And the American, Troy Rutman, was the happy beneficiary of that and won the race. In fourth, we have a man that was 22 years, 26 days old. That's 54 days younger than Troy was. A Spaniard who would go on to become a 2-times world champion. I am, of course, talking about Fernando Alonso. Indeed, he did win his first race the same year as Kimi did in 2003. Kimi took round 2, but Fernando took round 13, which was the Hungarian Grand Prix. So at the time, he came away from that race as the youngest ever pole sitter, youngest ever podium finisher, and youngest ever race winner in Formula One history at the time. He started from pole and pretty much ran away with it. Kimi Raikkonen was 17 seconds behind in the end, and he even lapped Michael Schumacher. But then Schumacher still won the title that year, so I'm sure he wasn't too bothered in the end. In third place, bronze medal, we have a man that was 21 years and 320 days old. That's 71 days younger than Fernando. The maiden win for Charles Leclerc, of course, came at the fateful 2019 Belgian Grand Prix. Antoine Hubert was much more than just a talented racing driver. He was a friend to many, and for Charles to pick up his maiden victory in Formula One just one day after his mate had lost his life at that same circuit, I mean, that was always going to be a poignant first victory for Charles, whatever the circumstances, but particularly there. What is quite interesting, though, is that if Charles had won that Bahrain Grand Prix 154 days prior, the race that was snatched from him with Ferrari engine troubles, unusual, Charles would still be P3 on this list. Second place, a driver, 21 years and 73 days old, 247 days younger than Charles, the 2008 Italian Grand Prix, the Toro Rosso of Sebastian Vettel, of course. The rain came down and a 21-year-old Seb ran riot. First in qualifying, kind of benefited from, I think it was Hamilton and Massa maybe fitting intermediates when they should have fitted wets, but they didn't. But either way, Seb put it on pole, and in the race, Heikki Kovalainen and McLaren behind him couldn't touch him. He just drove away. Ended up being very convincing. Again, not to discredit Pierre's victory in 2020 at all at Monza, but Seb made that result himself. He didn't need to rely on a 10-second penalty for the leader or whatever to get that result in the end. So it was quite the insight into the 4-time world champion we were going to be seeing in a couple of years. This is 2008 and he won his first in 2010, didn't he? Lewis would, of course, take that 2008 title, but Seb's time to shine was very much on the horizon. And here we are, number 1, the youngest race winner of all time in Formula One. Many of you will know who this is already, but some of you may not. A man who was 18 years and 228 days old when he won his maiden race. Yes, 10 years younger than me. I mean, not to the day, but in terms of years, I'm 28, he was 18. Depressing. 2 years and 210 days, so nearer to 3 years than 2 years, younger than Sebastian. Well over double the age gap of any of the age gaps in this list. I am, of course, talking about Super Max Verstappen. Let's just, in context, this is insane. So by the time Max reached Seb's age, when Seb won his first race, Max had already won 5. Obviously, Spain 2016, his very first, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute. But there was also Malaysia and Mexico in 2017 and Austria and Mexico in 2018. At the time of recording, right now, like, Max is 23, which still was just like, what? How is he only 23 when he's been in the sport and been doing so well for so long? At time of recording, he's still younger than Kimi Raikkonen, who's 8th on this list. Max has already won 10. He's won 10. And he's 23. I think we forget just how young Max still is and how long a career he's got ahead of him. Max surely is going to win multiple world titles, surely. Anyway, talking to Spain 2016, obviously he benefited massively from the iconic Catalunya crash between Nico and Lewis in the first lap. Max actually qualified P4 behind Ricciardo, his teammate at the time, but he managed to get Ricciardo up the inside of the first corner. And then it was pretty much plain sailing from there. He had a bit of Ferrari pressure towards kind of the end, but nothing that he couldn't handle, clearly. And particularly, this is just so impressive for so many reasons. Not only was he so young, but this was his first race in a Red Bull because he'd been in the Toro Rosso and then Red Bull did the classic Kvyat out, Max in, switcheroo. And to be fair, in that instance, it worked out a treat for him. there we have it, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time. These are the 9 youngest F1 winners of all time. Are you surprised by any of these in this list? Do you think anyone is going to win a race at younger than 18 years, 228 days? I think that is incredibly unlikely ever in the sport. I don't know. Maybe Max will hold that title forever. That would be a madness, wouldn't it? My name is Tommo. This is the Tommo F1 YouTube channel. Maybe not in name, but always in spirit, of course. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.